Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Rose City Politics. It is July 14th. Our regular panel tonight includes myself, John Lidke. We have Doug Sartori coming from the Hall of Justice. How are things there, Doug?
Aquaman has really screwed things up this time, but we're hoping we'll be able to get things back to normal real soon.
Just get in, figure it out, and we'll report back soon about that. We also have Don Merrifield Jr. here. Don, you're still coming to us from your void of purgatory. How are things?
Things are good. It's very blank and empty in here, but I see on your background you have my spirit animal behind you, Scrooge McDuck. I'm happy with that one.
Sometimes you just need to hang out with your friends, and
that's it.
It's great.
And count your gold coins. That's what you do on the weekend, right?
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to go for a dive straight into a Olympic-sized swimming pool, like the aquatic center filled with gold coins.
Ironically, that's exactly how much money it loses every year. So
excellent. Well, it is great to be here. Speaking of Olympic-sized pools filled with gold coins, we need you to become a Patreon subscriber. It won't cost that much, though, but it'll cost you a little bit, maybe $7 a month. We'd appreciate it. Head on over to patreon.com. We put out extra content there. You'd be able to help us make this show. We'll give you shout outs if you become a Patreon subscriber. You get prioritized access. You also get access to some pretty cool content that other people don't get to see.
Doug will make you a Christmas dinner. That's nice.
Doug shows up Christmas Eve and he'll make you an entire Christmas dinner. It doesn't matter if you've already eaten. He will show up on Christmas Eve.
We just don't want him coming to our house anymore on Christmas Eve unexpected.
It's been weird the past couple of years, especially under COVID. I mean, no one wanted him near us. We had to take a draw and I lost. And then when I kicked him off my porch, he went to Don's place.
And you're Jewish, so that's like 7 days of Doug. Jesus.
My Christmas catering business used all the appropriate PPE, and I won't hear a word against it.
No one was complaining about the PPE, Doug. Let's be honest about that. But anyways, we just want you guys to deal with that. Anyways, we put out a show every week. You all know that. So please follow, share, subscribe. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. We're on Twitter. We are wherever you get your podcasts. And we broadcast live on tape every week thanks to the kind support of LiUNA 625, Building Better Communities. Now, we have a show tonight that we are excited to talk to you about. We're going to be going right in to talk about the mayor, Dilkins, lobbying Ottawa on the urgent need for more COVID funding. The city is also pursuing a homeless shelter. This comes after news of River Place towards the Ambassador Bridge. It is a facility that some of the people that were displaced from the tent camp that was running up one of the old train tracks towards the river, it's continually damaged. It was actually, they just had their pipes replaced and they were stolen again. And then we're going to be talking about a friend of the show, Darcie Renaud. She's got a column. It's spicy. It's about Roseland Golf and Curling Club. And then if we got any time, we're going to be talking about the Italy win and, what that meant, I guess, in terms of some of the other public gatherings that we've seen. So let's dive right into it. If we had a secondary theme song, this would be it. Hit it. Nope, we don't have a secondary theme song. Topic one, we're up though.
You're pulling out all the stops tonight, Lidke. What's going on?
I'm having fun. It's a good show. I don't know. It's good. We're here.
All right.
We're all 2 shots plus in. I feel like we're getting closer and closer to just, shooting the shit in person.
I go away for a month and what the hell happens with you guys?
This is what happens when you
Doug's fine. John's lost his freaking mind.
People ask, why are there so many Jews in show business? It's just natural. we just gravitate towards it. And people ask why, and it's like, I don't know, what are you doing? Anyways, we're gonna go straight into it. Mayor
I am not,
Dilkins,
nobody's touching that one, man. Go on.
you can't. That's the thing. You throw out the hot topic and
That's
it becomes fact. We are, let me hit that vape. It's so hot. So Mayor
All right.
Dilkins, though, is lobbying Ottawa for pandemic cash. We've talked about this coming up. We knew it would be coming. Brian Cross put this out on the 9th of July. The mayor cited Windsor's unique position as the owner of an international border crossing and an airport that are both losing millions, quite frankly, because of the pandemic. And he says that he has written to federal cabinet ministers seeking urgent financial help. Latest projections show a $14.5 million pandemic caused deficit by the end of 2021, due largely to a $7 million deficit projected at the tunnel and a $3.5 million deficit at the airport. We know the city is the sole shareholder, and it usually enjoys a $1 million annual dividend from each, but they're, of course, now facing the dilemma of potentially propping them up financially. The mayor says in a letter to the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs and the President of the Queen's Privy Council of Canada that, we need some help here. So let's use that as a jumping off point right now. We've discussed this before. The city's in a pretty precarious place, you guys, obviously, with the bridge, obviously they're dealing with their own stuff over there. They're getting all of the major traffic. We've lost our revenue from, passenger travel through the tunnel. We have looked at the airport that was shut down for a very long time. We know that there are other major entities, Caesars, for example, that's been shut down. We haven't been getting dividends that we're used to there. We've lost some of our consistent money streams that we are used to. This is a problem. We know that we've got a huge deficit here, $14.5 million. We know the administration that they did recommend a tax increase, quote unquote, if you will, a keeping up with inflation to accommodate the pitfalls that we have. Doug, what is your take on this? I mean, we've had a mayor who has, really spent a lot of time over the past 4 or 5 months, 6 months. We've spoken about a lot on the show, going after this federal government, attacking them here, attacking them there. But, right now, of course, I guess we're all supposed to ignore that. This is the problem, that you don't get this kind of, questioning from the mainstream news outlets. Like, it's interesting seeing this type of ask right now after, the attack earlier.
So first of all, and I think that senior governments, federal or provincial, one hopes that when an urgent appeal comes from a municipality, that the first thing they think or ask themselves is not, has this person pissed us off lately? This is not about the personalities of the leaders involved. This is about the need in Windsor for some financial assistance. And just looking at these numbers, $14.5 million is obviously a big number. Those are pretty significant losses for those entities. Putting that in perspective, if the city of Windsor were to just swallow that and pass it directly on to taxpayers in 1 year, that would represent by itself something like a 4% tax hike. So, we are talking about significant dollars, and not getting some kind of relief would have an impact on, the ability of the municipality to do the things that it wants to do. But I think there are a lot of options besides just a large payout from senior government. I don't know how realistic that is. I'm sure that every municipality or many municipalities in Canada have a similar story to tell, and I don't know that there is a fund available for these kind of payouts. So I don't know how realistic a request this is, and to the point that you made earlier, this is part of the problem in this environment where Mayor Dilkens, I don't think it's controversial at all to say that he has heavily politicized provincial and federal relations with the municipality. And unfortunately, to me, that means that it's really hard for me to know how seriously to take this. It's hard for me to know how reasonable and realistic a request this is. This is the person who wanted to do shots in the tunnel, vaccination shots in the tunnel, and spent weeks embarrassing
Don smiling like me, because I mean, listen, if we were doing shots in the tunnel, I wouldn't have been as opposed to the idea. If we were doing shots of like bourbon or something in the tunnel, I would have been so on board.
Well, if the vaccination program had been successful, it's a natural next step to consider is putting a nightclub in the tunnel. But my point is that Mayor Dilkens has gone off on flights of fancy in the recent past, to serve his own personal political ends. That makes it hard to judge and hard to just know whether or not we should take something like this seriously. But let's put this in perspective. It's just over a week ago that the city approved a gigantic project to completely remake 80 Knox. That is something that is optional. That's not something this city had to do. So I guess that's maybe helping me answer my own question. How seriously should we be taking this concern being raised by Mayor Dilkens? Look at what they do rather than what they say. And he was happy to make a commitment, a $30 million commitment for a new community center in the West End, or a rebuild of the community center in the West End. And he had to know about those losses at the tunnel and the airport at the time. So I'm not really sure how serious to take it. And I think that the city has a lot of options in terms of how it would address something like this if the shortfall does fall all on us. So I think we have to kind of wait and see how things go.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, we all kind of know that there's probably going to be a federal election coming up pretty soon. Do you think he's smarter than we think he is, and he's calling out the federal government for money now, knowing that they're probably not going to say no to a lot of financial requests just from a campaign perspective?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Don. Certainly the expectation of many is that there will be a federal election coming up very soon. And this story kind of fits into that pre-election positioning. And you may well be right. It may well be, making the request at a time. It's like when, when dad hits the horses and he gets he's got the big pot of money in his wallet from winning on betting on the horses. That's the time that you ask dad to buy you a new 8-track for your car. You don't ask him when his wallet's thin. You ask him when he's ready to spend.
When you hit the trifecta, that's when dad's got cash. That's when you want to hit him up.
Right.
Yeah, I think a point that you made, it's, I don't know how many times we can have the same conversation, but, there's certain members, the mayor included on council, who continuously talk about, looking out for the taxpayers, and we're going to try and, be lean and mean and cut excess. But it only seems like excess that they don't want. Because like you said, they just talked about around $30 million to redo 80 Knox. Adventure Bay, like my Scrooge McDuck joke at the beginning, loses money like water, but they'll never get rid of that. It seems odd that you go begging for money when you're still spending like a drunk sailor. No offense to drunk sailors out there. So, if you're gonna, just look at it, if you look at it like your personal expenses, look, we've all gone through the pandemic for the last year and a half, and then I'm sure our listeners and viewers have gone through a lot of financial situations where they've had to make choices. The city, well, certainly the mayor, I'm not going to say the city, well, I'll say everybody because everybody's kind of got their hands in it. The mayor and city council doesn't seem like they want to even consider, some of these, what I would consider vanity projects are something that can be pushed back. It seems like every time we announce a project, whether it's the beacon down at, the waterfront or the 80 Knox thing that came up, it's when these are brought forward and voted on and approved, it's like, well, these are things we have to have. We have no choice but to fund these now. When the reality is, yeah, I mean, I think the streetcar building was what, $7 million. Like, there's ways to figure out this money. That's why it leads me to believe that this is really just, the prime minister is not going to be too harsh, and you can call him out and drag him out in like your horse racing analogy. Now's the time to ask them for money because they're probably not going to say no. So I think this is a way for him to cover the deficit in the budget, still get all these vanity projects that he wants, and have somebody else pay for it. So there you go. John, you look terrified over there. Are you okay? Are you all right?
I am terrified. I am always terrified after you wrap up your statements. I don't know if there's a secondary.
Yeah, I'm down to one a day now, John. So yeah, you're safe.
Anything else that we want to say on this one?
I think we've pretty much covered it.
Yeah.
The only other thing that I'd say is the city has substantial financial reserves. If we really got left hanging here and needed to absorb these losses, I find it hard to believe that it would be all paid for out of property tax in one single year. There's no doubt it would have an impact, but it's not like they're going to be driving around asking people to put their spare change in a Miracle Drive kind of thing. Put your spare change in a can out on the porch so that we can fund the tunnel.
It's going to be a World War II rubber drive. Just put all your used tires out at the front so we can build our planes.
These are good ideas, guys.
No, I don't understand why they don't call us more. Another point, obviously the industry I'm in, real estate, it always kind of, especially now, they're like, we've built so many new homes in the city, whether it's homes, whether it's apartment buildings, whether it's condos, low-rise condos, whatever. Whenever they talk about not raising taxes, they actually, in effect, are actually lowering taxes a little bit, because the number of properties that come in that add into the tax base, they don't just let that ride. I mean, if you got 200 houses built or 200 residential properties, $6,000 each, you're bringing in $1.2 million in extra tax revenue without raising taxes for the current tax base. They don't ever let that ride. And I don't understand, if we're going to encourage development, and if we're going to want to develop, part of the reason for that, aside from the housing issue, is it's an increase to the tax base. But we seem to just dismiss that and go, well, we're not going to raise any more revenue. It seems there's an easy way to do this, and we could have been doing it for years, and that would have more than made up for this. But I think your point with the reserves is the obvious one. Like, we built up a lot of reserves in the last little while, so 13 million isn't.
You're right. Let's pursue this a little more, because I think you bring up a really interesting point, and it's always a good opportunity to talk about this. Because the rhetoric is so simple and the reality is so complex. When we talk about holding the line on taxes, when you hear that rhetoric, you are being told that the city will hold the line on spending. That's what a 0% increase means. It means that we are spending $0 more than we spent last year. And to Don's point, we've talked a lot about how inflation eats away at the city's buying power, and that a tax freeze is really a tax cut, because unlike other forms of tax, property taxes aren't automatically indexed to inflation. So you're really reducing taxes. But it's a great point, Don, as the tax base grows, if we continue to hold the line on revenue, we're actually shrinking the burden on each individual taxpayer. But more than that, and I think it's really important to think about that, it means we're doing more with less. It means that we are sustaining more infrastructure with less dollars, right? There's, you don't add hundreds of houses to the city without adding corresponding infrastructure and future obligations for maintaining that infrastructure. So it's a really interesting point. I just wanted to kind of dig into it a little bit.
Well, and on top of just the tax base, I mean, anyone knows when you build a house, it's like a $30,000 before you put a shovel in the ground. A lot of that is impost fees, permit fees. So the city, every house that gets built, they make 30 grand on. And to hold the line on revenue, we should probably stop using the term holding the line on taxes, because they're not. It doesn't make any sense. It's not going to be, as an individual, more of a burden to me if we just keep the tax rate at the same level it is now and then add income based off of new development. I mean, it's an easy solution. I never understood why it seems so complicated.
Well, it's an easy talking and selling point, right?
Yeah, and the reality is we know that's all it is. That's the problem. If it wasn't just a talking point, if it wasn't, as soon as Councillor Francis wants to build a vertical park down a ditch somewhere, it's a fabulous idea. So there's always money for that kind of stuff. It's the old, it's the old Las Vegas joke, Hey, can I borrow $100? I lost all my money. I got to get home. Well, how do I know you're not going to use this to gambling? Oh no, I got gambling money. I just need $100 to get home. So
Or like, there's always money in the banana stand. Don't worry about it.
I've got Roseland renovation money. I just don't have money to continue to fund my obligations.
Yeah.
It's really hard to take the pleas seriously when we have money for, I want to say, I guess, frivolous expenses at the outset, but what are you going to say?
Well, everybody's had to cut back during the pandemic, personally, businesses, individuals. I don't see why the city, for some reason, thinks they're entitled to keep spending all the money they were before on projects that really aren't. They're vanity projects. They're not required to keep us all alive.
80 Knox need 35-40 million spent if we can't get that grant. Apparently so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I just want to kind of push back on Don a little bit. And I think I take a different lesson from this. And I think big part of the problem is how atomized all these conversations are. So we have this piece, and Mayor Dilkins is saying there's a, $14.5 million shortfall. Things are really serious. Then last week we had to spend $33 million on 80 Knox pool. Then, there's something else happening and we're crying poor. I think that is really something that is a problem. It's really hard, I think, for the general public to keep track of this. And then as a person who has spent some time digging into budget documents and looking at the way that the municipality reports to its taxpayers how it spends money and how it intends to spend money, those documents are opaque. They are not designed to be easy to understand. And if they are, they really need to get some new making stuff easy people down at the city. I think if we had a better communication of budget priorities, of spending, if we had better communication on that, we could have more mature and complex conversations. And then what happens is, in my opinion, what happens when you ask the obvious questions or you raise the obvious objections is that the people who live and breathe this stuff, so the municipal politicians or people in administration, they kind of give you a little pat on the head and say, it's really cute that you're trying to figure this out, but it's so complicated and you don't understand it. And let me explain to you why what you said is stupid. I'm paraphrasing, or that's not that, but that to me is the tone that is taken a lot of times. If the public doesn't understand what you're doing, if the public doesn't understand the full kind of picture of the city finances, that's on you, City of Windsor. That's on you. There are way a world of opportunities to improve the communication of financial information and to improve the communication to the public on these matters that have not been taken. Now, with all of that said, I think that the idea of spending investing some dollars to improve budget communications has been floated again, and hopefully that's something that's going to happen this time, because it's badly needed. But anyway, I know I just went off on a little mini rant there, but it's really frustrating to me how we're supposed to take all these little bites and nuggets and just accept whatever the narrative of the day is, and the less we understand of the big picture, the better it is for those who make decisions.
Oh, don't apologize. I'm sure they like listening to it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Let's move on to the next one, though. Windsor's pursuing a homeless shelter. This surprised me. A report's going to council next week, pitching this week, I guess, maybe at this point, coming soon, pitching the idea of a city construction of a renovation potentially of a space for a 60-bed homeless shelter and hub with wraparound services all in one location. This idea comes from the city entering the shelter space due to COVID. In April of last year, the city opened up the housing and homelessness help hub at Water World, providing services, and more than 22,000 people used it. More than 1,100 presented as experiencing some level of homelessness. 350 were identified as being chronically homeless. The mayor wants the homelessness master plan set into action with this. This would provide wraparound services that would include mediation, outreach supports, healthcare, mental health practitioners, and potentially even addictions counseling. This is a pretty cool idea. I mean, I don't think there's anyone here on the panel who's going to say that this is a bad idea. I think that this is obviously necessary. We know that it's necessary. We've seen the problems during COVID. It was a stress test, if you will, and we saw facilities that were shuttered, open, shuttered, open, shuttered, shuttered, open, shuttered. It was a problem. Having a much bigger one that can deal with a larger amount of people that's run by the municipality, that there would be a bit more consistency. What are you thinking about this, Doug?
So yeah, I mean, I think that it's a welcome investment and it's a welcome program. It's good to see that there is some effort to move these services forward. And what I'm left thinking about is, what are the reasons? Like, how did this come about? And I think one aspect of this is probably the pandemic and the exposure to the realities that exist in our city for people in difficult circumstances. I think that was more widely exposed, not just to the public, but also to decision makers at City Hall. I think that there was a lot of work done during the pandemic that probably spurred conversations about how do we make this or that cooperation or collaboration more permanent. And those are good things. I also think that the growing tensions and difficulties between the city of Windsor and the downtown mission probably have a lot to do with this. I think it's fair. We've covered this and we've talked about this a lot, and I think it would be a fair conclusion for the city to reach. To think, maybe we don't have the reliable partner that we wish we had in terms of provisioning services to this part of the community, and maybe we need to take a little bit more control of it. So, to me, just kind of looking at the news reports and reading between the lines, those are the sort of things that I speculate are the genesis of where we got now. I'm really glad to see this is an item that is so high on the agenda that we're making this investment and that the effort has been put into it. And I think we are very critical on this show of Mayor Dilkens, and I think fair enough. He doesn't have enough critics, and so that burden falls on us. But in this case, I think it's fair to point out how far the mayor personally has come on this. Folks who have listened to the show for a long time or been paying attention to municipal politics for a long time may remember when Mayor Dilkens, as Ward 1 city councillor, said some really crappy things about panhandlers downtown, said some pretty like dehumanizing things about panhandlers downtown. We've often talked about the riffraff and undesirables comment that he made about his visit to Colorado. So I think that it's really good to see Mayor Dilkens kind of jumping out in front of this and being willing to carry it forward. I don't know how much he had to do really with the genesis of it, or how much he had to do with putting it together, but I do think it's a sign of some level of personal growth that he's able to champion it and maybe has a more enlightened attitude than he did a few years ago.
It was interesting in the article that I read, the mayor had stated, when during the pandemic, when they opened up some of the temporary shelters, that he was impressed that the wraparound services, and I think that's, to me, that's what's most important. Well, that's certainly a very important part of dealing with this issue. The wraparound services that were working now that everybody was kind of in the same room. So I'm kind of two thoughts on this. On one hand, I feel like, look, I come out here and say we should contract out everything all the time. And, I'm all for letting the private sector do things. But in a situation like this, when you're dealing with homeless people and you're dealing with addiction problems and mental illness, there's a role for government. And what I'm actually happy about is that the city on its own is going to kind of take a role in this, as opposed to just sloughing it off onto the mission or to other agencies that have been handling this. Because just by the mayor's statements alone, he obviously hasn't been too aware of the issues aside from getting people off the street for one day and feeding them for one day. It's still shocking, and I still don't understand. So this is for people smarter than me, but I never understood there's so many social programs out there, from social assistance, disability, blah, 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 that we pay for. But if you're homeless or if you're living at the shelter, you can't get those checks because you don't have an address. It never made sense to me that why wouldn't we just use why can't they just use the 400 building as their address and the checks go there, whatever. However, there's a solution to this problem, and it doesn't seem like it's a hard solution. So my hope is, if the city's going to take a role in this, in the homeless shelter, and he was, like I say, he spoke quite broadly about the wraparound services. I'm hopeful that some people who have just been kind of rotating in and out of the system forever may actually finally get some permanent help. And I think a part of it is just awareness. I don't think look, this is a very difficult issue to deal with: homelessness, addiction, mental illness. This, a city can't solve this. This is multi-layered levels of government and tons of money and tons of a concerted effort. So I'm hopeful, like I say, that hopefully they see what's going on now. They're aware of it now, and something to me that can seem like an easy solution for getting them on other social assistance programs, can be resolved. And and again, I don't know why the downtown mission can't be used for its people who are going there as an address for handing out social assistance or whatever. I just don't know. So maybe there's a reason, but it never made any sense to me. So my hope is that now that the mayor seems to be aware that this is a problem, that this whole situation can get some kind of resolution.
Streamlining things, would obviously be the best, right? Like wherever it is. It's clear that there are problems throughout the entire stream of it, right, Don? From what you're talking about. So, just why not just make it as simple as possible? I find this one very interesting, Doug. I think that you're right. The way that this idea is obviously born out of two things. I think one, what was exposed during the pandemic, but also two, there's now funding that is available at the federal and provincial levels for this kind of a thing. So, take the money. It's a positive outcome that can come from this, because clearly there's a need, right?
Yeah, I think so. And just building on your comments, there is clearly a need. I think it's really interesting to me how hard it is for us to see a problem holistically. You know, a year ago, maybe a little bit more than a year ago, there was a really fascinating piece in the Windsor Star about people living in their cars. You know, and I don't know if you folks remember it, but that really stuck with me. You know, folks who were being priced out of the rental market, or were being priced out of the real estate market, still have, you know, have jobs, have the resources to own a vehicle, and we're figuring it out. And I think when you look at homelessness in Windsor, what the visible signs of it are, the you know, the I hate to use this trite expression, but the tip of the iceberg, and there's so much going on below the surface. There is, you know, I think there's a lot of pressure on people all over the city, and we know that the increasing rents and the increasing price of real estate, and the failure of the housing market to provide sufficient supply to meet demand. We know that those things are brewing, and they are part of the problem. We also know that we have an opiate crisis in North America. We know that we've had you know, that we've had a huge impact over years and even decades in terms of the growth of this problem. Those two things coming together, one of the most severe symptoms is the, you know, chronic homelessness. But what is the solution? Like, what are the big picture solutions here? What are we doing to make an impact on the big picture forces that are causing a lot of misery, a lot of challenges for people? And so what we're talking about here, and I'm not trying to take anything away from any of the work that people are doing, or how important this initiative is, but what we're talking about is providing better treatment for the absolute most severe symptoms of these challenges. So what is it going to take? And I'm not putting this all on municipal governments, but it's all levels of government for sure. But more importantly, government implements the priorities of the public. And you know, governments are very sensitive to public opinion. They're very sensitive to what people are thinking. So when we start to point the finger of blame, ultimately that finger points back at the general population. This stuff has not been a high enough priority, I think. And I think even more so that a lot of the people who are the most engaged, the most vocal, are people who are on the winner side of the equation when it comes to that real estate game. People who are seeing the value in a house they own accumulate and accumulate and accumulate. But like, this is a serious problem that's a lot bigger than you know, the thousands of, or the, you know, the thousands or hundreds of people who are going to receive services here at this facility. And I just don't see a sense of urgency to address those challenges.
Interesting. Anything you want to add to that, Don?
Well, since Doug just slighted my whole industry, yeah, I'm gonna.
Did I?
Well, a little bit. Look, I just want to make some money, Doug. Leave me alone. No, you're right. Look, obviously, I'm in the real estate industry. I see it every day, and it's, you know, we used to talk quite a bit when things weren't going good in the city, about, you know, what are some of the solutions, and housing was, you know, the low housing costs were almost seen as a problem. And, you know, we would talk about, you know, that mythical one day when the city was doing well and housing values were going up, and then it opens up a whole bunch of other problems. And the problems is some people just can't afford to either get in the rental market or purchase a home. And it's something you can't just ignore. Yeah, there's a lot of people out there, and, you know, me included, I'm in the real estate business, is, you know, we're all happy about this. Great. You know, I bought a house 15 years ago. It's worth triple what I paid for it. And I mean, all you guys are the same way. But it does open up a whole other whole other slew of problems that you can't just ignore. And I think that's exacerbated the problem on top of just your typical chronic homeless people and, the addiction side of things. So no, you're right. I think it's look, this is Rose City politics, so I can't, you know, sign off on the story without saying one thing that the mayor's doing is stupid. So this is my one thing the mayor's doing that's stupid. Is I read in the article that at the city council either last Monday or next Monday they're going to seek to approve this, and they're also going to approve spending $175,000 to hire someone to go out and find the perfect property for all this. It seems weird because only if there was an industry that already existed where people actually professionally go out and find properties for their clients and don't charge them anything up front. It's so if he's taken applications, Mr. Mayor, I've been doing this for 21 years in the city of Windsor for 175 grand. I will dedicate the next year of my life to this program, and I'm more than happy to be signed on to this.
There you go. And if you want more information, just check out donmerrifield.com.
Junior.com. Yeah.
Before we go away from this topic, I think what I'm trying to say is there are problems that we don't talk about in our community. And one of the things that gets an immense amount of pushback when you start to talk about it is inequality. My read of the data, my read of the information that is available to the public is that inequality in our community, our broader community, if you want to say Windsor Essex as a community, inequality has been growing. If you look at income patterns in this city 30 years ago and you look at income patterns in this city today, there are a group of people who used to be doing pretty well who are doing real well, and there are a group of people who used to be doing pretty well who are doing real bad. And I don't think that can continue. I don't think that sets us up to be a healthy community. I think that's why some of the debates are becoming increasingly bitter, and why some of the positions that municipal politicians take seem increasingly detached from reality. In an environment where this was a generally prosperous region, having a silly fight about nice streetlights in Southwood Lakes, just to take one example, that's the kind of political debate that a prosperous community has. Little arguments at the margins that suddenly become really important because they're the most important thing we have to talk about. But when I look at it today, I think that's a sign of serious dysfunction. That we have a group of people in the city, and I don't want to just pick on people who live in Southwood Lakes. I know people who live there. I like them. I'll be knocking on their doors looking for votes for somebody or another soon enough. So, don't be too mad. But how detached from reality do you have to be as a person who lives in Southwood Lakes, as a person who is one of the winners in our society and one of the winners in our community, to be angry that you pay proportionally more taxes than somebody else because your property's worth a whole bunch more, and you might not get the fancy premium streetlights? Like, with all due respect to those folks, like, your priorities are completely screwed up if that is the issue. If that's the only issue you signed a petition on in the last 12 months, you suck a little bit.
Yeah, and another thing that goes along with this, we brought this up in the past. A lot of people see homelessness and addiction problems as a downtown problem. And if you live in Southwood Lakes, or if you live in South Windsor, Riverside, Tecumseh, pick someplace outside the city. And even our city councilors, I mean, we go back to Councillor Hillary Payne, when we talked about garbage being left in rental properties on the streets. Well, it's not a problem in my ward, so I don't care. And even some stories that come up, and we've obviously touched on those topics on the show of, nobody cared about the homeless situation or addiction issues until it shows up in your neighborhood. There were stories about, some people in your neighborhood, Doug, out in South Windsor, in some of the more wealthier areas, saying, we're having problems with, shopping cart people are showing up and break-ins and things like that. And same with Riverside and surrounding areas. But no, like you say, nobody gave a rat's ass until it showed up in their area. This problem's been going on for years and years. And you're right. It seems ridiculous that even on the political, front of things, we can only see, everything's going great, everything's fine. Well, when everything's going great and everything's going fine, that's when you should be focusing on the things that aren't going great or aren't going fine. And right now, going back to the housing situation, yeah, some people are winning the lottery and some people are having a very difficult time. And you have to understand there's pluses and minuses to both sides of that. If you've been in your house for 20 years and you're retiring and you don't have a lot of money set for retirement, and now your house has gone up, great, you can use that as a retirement plan. But on the flip side, if you're a young family starting out and you're getting priced out of the market. So we have to, and politicians more so, have to stop focusing on 4 years election cycles. A lot of this we've talked about, Doug, and it's been a big issue for you, is, how long ago you talked about economic diversification in the city? Nobody, everything, when the economy is going fine, well, great, it's going fine, but that's when you should be focusing on diversifying. These problems we're having now are because we didn't do anything for the last 20 years.
Yeah,
John.
No one's going to argue with you on that. I think that we have pushed that up to the front burner long enough with the heat full on. We need to pull it back and give a palate cleanser. We are going to pull it down to a 3.
Are you doing like a late night, quiet storm radio show that we're not aware of, John? Because all these crazy analogies and stories, I don't understand what happened.
There is an issue that
There
is
we go.
going on in South Windsor that we need to discuss, and I am the one to bring it to you. Roseland is in need of better accountability, potentially even a new strategic plan. Darcie Renaud, friend of the show, had a guest column published. That was weird. That I went full ACMR there, right?
That was like straight Barry White. I was very impressed.
Darcie Renaud wrote a column in the Windsor Star, guest column, said she was surprised to see that the budget variance report headed to the city council included a projected $300,000 deficit for Roseland Golf and Curling Club. Losses were attributed to pressures brought on by the pandemic, but these deficits aren't new, she said. They have very little to do with the pandemic. She writes that at the end of 2019, Roseland's accumulated deficit was over 1.2 million, having lost 392,000 in 2019, 231,000 in 2018, 314,000 in 2017, and 33,000 in 2016, according to their unaudited financial statements. The 2016 losses were chalked up to weather by the board chairman. It's Fred Francis. You might know him. And the 2017 losses were accounted to stormwater projects, according to media reports. It's an interesting column. Let's just stop it right there. I think that there's a lot to chew on before we move on. Interesting. I like looking at, what like costs year after year after year. Doug, I know that you more than most love to wake up, head on down to Roseland, spend a half day curling, and I know that you want to see the full clubhouse renovation. So let's get your unadulterated opinion on this.
So I thought this was a really interesting piece. I encourage folks to go back and take a look at it. Saturday's Windsor Star was the guest column was published. It's full of information. There's more that I think you're going to share. Those losses are pretty significant and they have been pretty sustained. It looks like 2016 was the last time that there was what you might call a reasonable deficit at Roseland, $33,000. So for 5 years, the red ink has been flowing. And I think the argument that Darcie was trying to advance is essentially that there is not a steady hand at the tiller at Roseland, that the board is not effectively governing the organization and guiding it to where it needs to be. I find that argument pretty compelling.
Well, let me jump in
yeah.
right there. Roseland's board didn't even present their long overdue 2018 or 19 financial statements to council until this January. Just wanted to jump in.
Yeah, and an interesting tidbit that was in the piece is that Councillor Gignac moved to have that report put on the consent agenda. So, I think that it's fair to say that there is an effort here by Fred Francis and by some of his allies on council to minimize the amount of noise that this issue makes, which I think is pretty rich considering how much noise Councillor Francis has made about a one-time incident of serious fraud at IRCA. And I'm not trying to minimize the fraud or the seriousness of it and how important it is to look at that. But Roseland has been losing that amount of money every single year for 5 years. And Councillor Francis wants to throw stones and it seems to me make a little bit of political hay and do some political damage to others around the table by pointing at this the issue of fraud at IRCA, when at the same time he is the person in charge. He's the chair of the board at Roseland. And he's overseeing an organization that is bleeding money year after year. And the solution that has been proposed is to build a new clubhouse, to spend millions on building a new clubhouse. Now, I don't know if that would turn around the fortunes of Roseland, but I don't think it's been fully examined. And if I were being asked to approve big capital spending at an organization, and I saw that there was a lack of urgency around addressing serious financial problems at the organization, I wouldn't be in too much of a hurry to make that investment.
Is there anything comparable to Roseland in another ward, in the sense of a city run bar at a recreational complex? I mean, I guess downtown, maybe the Beacon at the river.
Well, we joked about it, but a couple of weeks ago, but Willstead Manor is at least superficially similar city run organization. It's got pretty high maintenance requirements. It's a big old facility. The city does generate revenue from it, perhaps not quite as much as they do from golf, but that might be one that you could draw some comparisons with.
Man, give me the ability to bid on having a room in Willstead Manor, and I will turn that into a wicked cocktail bar. That'd be a lot of fun. I wish I could have that opportunity.
We could Airbnb it. That's a good idea.
Ooh, we could do that too.
Yeah. Actually, I think Lakeview Marina is probably the city-run marina on the East End is probably a comparable. I don't know if they make money or lose money. I assume they lose money because it's run by the city, but that would be a comparable type facility. Yeah, and Darcie wrote a great article. So yeah, like Doug, I encourage everybody to go read it because
I encourage everyone to read it too. Don't say that. Don't put it that way.
No, John doesn't care if you read or not. I think what was important in that article is whenever the topic of Roseland comes up, look, I haven't been subtle about my opinion of Roseland. I think we should sell it. And if if we sell it to a private person, they want to keep running as a golf course, as that's part of the requirements of sale, fine. And if no one takes it, well, that gives you your answer right there. They know it's never going to be a money-making operation. So, go build houses on it. I don't care. We get enough golf courses around here. We have bigger issues. I think what's important about the article that Darcie wrote is when we hear about these things, they're based off of 1 year time frames. Well, this year we didn't make money because of weather. Last year was the pandemic. There's always a new excuse, right? But if you look at it in totality, you realize This is just a facility that's been losing hundreds of thousands of dollars consistently for years. And the solution has always been, well, we're going to spend more money and that'll fix it. And it hasn't fixed it. So, eventually you got to stop the bleeding and decide, if this is not going to be a money making facility, as it's not because it hasn't been, then you have to put that out there and say, look, City of Windsor residents, we have a facility here. It's never going to make any money, but does it mean that much to you that we have to keep it, and we'll just fund it from your taxes? And if they say yes, you keep it. If they say no, you burn it down like Adventure Bay.
Okay. So I'm not advocating municipal arson. That's Don Merrifield, folks.
You got to think big, Doug. You got to stop thinking small.
Okay. But I think the larger point here is I think that, and let's not mince words. Darcie Renaud is a past political opponent of Fred Francis. It's entirely possible that she could be an opponent of Fred Francis again at some point in the future. And I don't think that those considerations are absent in her writing this piece. But I also don't think that we should dismiss good and valid criticism, just because it may have some element of political motivation. I don't think we should do that. I think the case that Darcie is making here is that Councillor Francis is not a good steward of public money. I think that's the case that she's making, and I think she makes a pretty compelling case about it. Councillor Francis, when there's a microphone in front of his face, he knows the lines that he's supposed to say. Respect the taxpayers, people on fixed incomes, the cost of living's always going up. We gotta save money. We don't have money for frills. I think that's pretty much, I've expended the entire output of the sort of, pull string Fred Francis doll, if we had one. Those are the things that he says. But I think it's really, really important to judge the claims of politicians based on what they do. And Councillor Francis is extremely concerned about good use of public money. He's extremely concerned about not incurring debt. He's extremely concerned about being a wise financial steward. At least those are the things he says. But they're not consistent with the things that he does. At least they're not consistent with the things that he has done in his time as chair of the board at Roseland. And I think it's entirely fair and a service to the community that Darcie has raised the issue and asked those questions. And I think Councillor Francis should find an answer.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. I have a question for John. John, do you think Doug should actually declare a conflict of interest in this topic? Just because if you did see his Facebook in the last week or so, he is obviously making money from the errant golf balls that land in his pool. So this is really a money generating scheme for Doug, and he doesn't want it to go away. That's why he encourages people to keep going to Roseland.
Just 90,000 more balls in my pool, and it'll pay for the scuba gear, Don.
There you go.
I was surprised because I saw the photo that he posted of him holding 4 buckets strung to both arms, 2 on each arm, $3 a bucket, and it was undercutting. And I think that there's a lot of questions we have to ask about his what are the motives? Obviously, what are the ethics involved? And
I don't want to contact the authorities, but I don't think he has a business license for selling used golf balls. So
all right, guys. Okay. We don't need to dig too deeply into any illicit rescue ball sales. That's not something that I'm not on trial here.
Exactly.
I am not on trial here.
Exactly like someone on trial, what they would say.
Next up is it'd be a shame if your house at 1264 Church Street burned down on the next.
The problem, of course, is if all the golf balls spill and then, a massive car accident, oh no, it's banana peels. I thought it's an interesting situation. All in all, we got to really question though, where are our tax dollars going? And I guess, of course, who's also benefiting from them indirectly?
Obviously, Doug.
All right, you guys. It was fun. It was funny at first, but now I'm just frustrated with you.
Well, you get to edit the show, so we'll find out how much of this 18-minute monologue was actually included. If you're listening right now and it was 18 minutes long, you'll know that that's how many jokes we had, Don and I, back and forth. But if it wasn't a full 18 minutes, you'll know that Doug went in and chopped out probably all the best jokes.
Yeah, it's terrible that I do that to you every single week, John.
Every week. I'm curious to hear how it all comes out, though. But it's a good show. Do we have any for your considerations this week? I don't know if we do.
I do.
You do? I'm listening.
Yeah. So just in the vein of my apparent alleged golf ball business, I have a little bit of a plug to make here.
$9 a bucket. It's pretty worthwhile.
On August 4th, Professor Mike Moffat, he is an economist at the Smart Prosperity Institute, and he will be joining local policymakers for a fun and engaging event on Maiden Lane to collaborate on what our rapid population growth and housing price inflation means for the community and how we respond. This is a ticketed event. It's a $25 ticket that gets you snacks and a drink. And a scintillating conversation. We're working on ways to have group participation. This event is sponsored by Monroe Strategic Perspective. You may know a good friend of the show, Melinda Monroe, and Parallel 42 Systems. We're also getting lots of great support and assistance from the Downtown Windsor BIA and the Windsor Law Center for Cities. So again, that's August 4th. If you go and take a look at any of Parallel 42 Systems social media or my own social media, you can not only can you make an inquiry about a great deal on tech consulting, but you can also find out all the details on this event, including where you can buy tickets. So check that out. I hope to see you folks there.
Well, thank you. I take your consideration.
Okay.
No, I took it. I like it. I will. I think I really want to go to that one. It's super interesting. Mike Moffat, I'm sure he has so much to say about Windsor.
Yes, and if you come and get a couple of drinks into Dr. Moffat, you might be able to ask him about his Atari 2600 game collection, and then we'd be really getting into the good stuff.
Ooh, that's where it's at. Don's giving double thumbs up. Well, hey, thanks, you guys. This was a fun one. I think we're all wrapped up, though, for Rose City politics. Am I wrong? No, not wrong. I'm right. It's been a fun one. It's July 14th. Our regular panel tonight included myself, John Lidke. We had Doug Sartori and Don Merrifield Jr. Please support us by becoming a Patreon subscriber. Head over to patreon.com/Rose City Politics. Check us out. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Like, share, and subscribe, please. And of course, we broadcast live every single week, thanks to the kind support of LiUNA 625, Building Better Communities. We broadcast live on tape. Is what I meant to say. I'm not lying to you. That's why you listen to the show. Hit the exit music, Doug. Night.